My son James called out of nowhere. "We're leaving tomorrow. Your beach house has already been sold. Bye." His voice sounded cold, distant. The beach house my late wife and I had spent 30 years building into our dream retirement home. I felt my chest tighten but kept my voice steady. "But you forgot one thing." There was a pause. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. I laughed, not from humor, but from the bitter irony, because the house he sold was actually not what he thought it was at all. I stared at the phone in my hand for a long moment after James hung up. 65 years old, and here I was, trying to process that my own son had just told me he sold my home out from under me. Not just any home. The beach house in Malibu that Sarah and I bought when we were just starting out. Sarah and I met in college, both of us studying architecture. We fell in love over blueprints and scale models, dreaming of the buildings we would design together. After graduation, we married and started our own firm, Richard's Architectural Design. For 30 years, we poured everything into that business, building it from a small operation running out of our garage to one of the most respected architectural firms in Southern California. The beach house was our first major purchase. It was run down when we bought it, but we saw the potential. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound deck, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific. Over the years, we renovated it room by room, weekend by weekend. Sarah would say it was our living blueprint, a testament to our journey together. When we retire, she would tell me, "We'll sit on that deck and watch the sunset every evening. Just you and me, Richard." But Sarah never got to see that dream realized. 3 years ago, cancer took her from me, pancreatic. By the time they caught it, it was already stage 4. I spent 6 months watching my vibrant, creative wife waste away, until there was nothing left but a shell of the woman I loved. After the funeral, I couldn't bear to go back to the firm. I sold my share to our partners and retreated to the beach house. It became my sanctuary, the place where I could still feel Sarah's presence in every corner, in every design choice we had made together. I spent my days walking on the beach, sketching, and slowly learning how to live alone. James and his sister Amanda had both grown up spending summers at the beach house. Amanda had followed in our footsteps, becoming an architect herself. She lived in Boston now, married with 2 kids. James had always been more restless, jumping from one venture to another. Last I knew, he had started a tech company that was struggling to find investors. Last Thanksgiving, the whole family had gathered at the beach house. James seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone. I noticed him spending an unusual amount of time in my home office, claiming he needed a quiet place for business calls. I thought nothing of it at the time. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something," James had said the night before everyone left. We sat on the deck, watching the waves crash against the shore. "What's on your mind, son?" "The company's in trouble. We need capital to stay afloat until our next funding round." I sighed. This wasn't the first time James had come to me with financial troubles. "How much are you talking about?" $200,000. I nearly choked on my drink. "James, that's a substantial amount." "I know, Dad, but this is different. We're on the verge of a breakthrough. 6 months from now, we'll be valued at 10 times that." I looked at my son, wanting to believe him. "Draw up a proper business plan. Show me the projections, the market analysis. If it looks viable, I'll help." James's face had darkened. "I don't have time for paperwork, Dad. I need the money now." "I'm sorry, but that's my condition. I'm not just going to hand over that kind of money without due diligence." He had left early the next morning, barely saying goodbye. I shook my head, coming back to the present. The call from James had come out of nowhere, after months of minimal contact, and now this bombshell about selling my house. I walked to my home office to look for the property documents, thinking I would need them when I called my lawyer. That's when I discovered the first sign of betrayal. My filing cabinet had been cleared out. The drawer that held all my property documents, financial records, and Sarah's trust paperwork was completely empty. With growing alarm, I checked my computer. Several files had been accessed recently, documents I hadn't opened in months. Property assessments, bank statements, investment portfolios. I called my bank immediately. The customer service representative confirmed my fears. Mr. Richards, there have been several large withdrawal attempts from your accounts over the past week. We flagged them as suspicious because they didn't match your normal banking patterns. I didn't authorize any withdrawals, I said, my voice tight with anger. That's why we blocked them, sir. The person attempting the transactions had your account information but couldn't pass our security protocols. I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. The pieces were falling into place. James's unusual interest in my office during Thanksgiving, his anger when I wouldn't give him money, and now, months later, this call about selling my house. My son hadn't just betrayed me on impulse. He had been planning this for months. I grabbed my car keys and headed straight for the beach house. The drive from my apartment in Los Angeles to Malibu usually took about an hour, but today I made it in 45 minutes, my knuckles white on the steering wheel the entire way. As I turned onto the private road leading to my property, I saw moving trucks parked in the driveway. Men in uniforms were carrying out furniture. My furniture. Pieces Sarah had carefully selected over the years. The antique bookcase we found at a flea market in San Diego. The hand-carved coffee table her father had made for us as a wedding present. I slammed on the brakes and jumped out of the car, rage pulsing through me. "Stop! What do you think you're doing?" I shouted, running toward the men. A middle-aged couple emerged from the house. The woman, tall with shoulder-length brown hair, looked confused. The man, balding with glasses, stepped forward defensively. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone suggesting I was the intruder. "This is my house," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I don't know what's going on here, but there's been a mistake." The couple exchanged glances. "We just bought this property," the woman said. "The sale was finalized yesterday." "That's impossible," I insisted. "I never listed this house for sale." "Sir," the man said firmly, "we have all the paperwork. We dealt with your son, James Richards. He had power of attorney and handled everything on your behalf." Power of attorney? I had never signed over power of attorney to James or anyone else. "There's been a misunderstanding," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "My son had no authority to sell this property. I need you to stop moving things out until we sort this out." The woman looked distressed. "We sold our home in Santa Barbara. We've paid in full. Our life savings." I felt a stab of sympathy for them, but I couldn't let this continue. "I understand you're in a difficult position, but so am I. This sale was fraudulent." Just then, a red sedan pulled into the driveway. A woman in a business suit stepped out, looking professionally concerned. "Mr. Richards?" she asked, approaching me. "I'm Paula Winters, the real estate agent who handled the sale. Your son said you might come by. He mentioned you've been having some difficulties lately." "What difficulties?" I demanded. Paula lowered her voice. "He explained about your dementia diagnosis. That's why he handled the sale for you. He said you needed to transition to an assisted living facility." "Dementia?" The word hit me like a physical blow. I didn't have dementia. I wasn't sick at all. "Show me the power of attorney document," I said. Paula retrieved a folder from her car and handed me a document. There was my signature at the bottom, next to a notary stamp. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close, but the R in Richards was formed differently than how I write it. Someone had forged my signature. "This document is fake," I said, my voice shaking. "I never signed this. I'm going to call the police." Paula looked genuinely shocked. "Mr. Richards, your son provided medical documentation about your condition. He had statements from your doctor." "What doctor?" I hadn't seen a doctor since my annual physical 6 months ago, and I had a clean bill of health. "Dr. Thompson?" Paula said, sounding uncertain now. I had never heard of a Dr. Thompson. As I stood there, trying to process the depth of this deception, my phone rang. It was Carol, a longtime family friend who lived down the street. "Richard, are you okay?" she asked when I answered. "James told us about your diagnosis months ago. We've all been so worried. He said you didn't want visitors because you were embarrassed about your memory lapses. My stomach churned. James hadn't just forged documents. He had been systematically lying to everyone in my life, isolating me so he could carry out his plan without interference. After ending the call with Carol, I asked Paula to see the sale documents. The beach house, conservatively valued at $3 million, had been sold for $1.5 million, half its market value. We were told it needed to be a quick sale to pay for your medical care, Paula explained, looking increasingly uncomfortable. I asked the buyers, Mark and Susan Turner, for some time to sort things out. Reluctantly, they agreed to pause the move while I made some calls. I drove straight to the local bank branch where I'd done business for 20 years. The manager, Frank, had known Sarah and me since we opened our accounts there. "Richard," he said, shaking my hand. "Good to see you. How are you feeling?" "Perfectly healthy," I replied. Despite what my son has been telling people, Frank's expression shifted. "He was in here last week, trying to access your accounts. He had the power of attorney paperwork, but something seemed off. I insisted on calling you directly to confirm, and he got agitated and left." "Thank you for that," I said, relief flooding through me that at least one person had been skeptical. As I sat in Frank's office, he helped me put a complete freeze on all my accounts. While we were reviewing my recent statements, I noticed several transfers to online auction sites over the past few months. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger alerts. When I got home to my apartment that evening, I logged into one of the auction sites. There they were: family heirlooms, Sarah's jewelry, collectibles we had acquired over our years together, all sold by a user named Vintage Collector 45 with contact information I recognized as James's. My son hadn't just tried to steal my house. He had been systematically looting my possessions for months, selling them piece by piece. I sat at my computer, staring at the evidence of his betrayal, feeling a hollow ache in my chest that was worse than any physical pain I'd ever experienced. Paula called that evening with more disturbing news. The sale contract included all the furniture and personal items in the house. The Turners had paid extra for the turnkey property, believing they were helping an elderly man transition to assisted living. The house James sold wasn't just my retirement home. It was the physical repository of 30 years of memories with Sarah, and he had sold it all out from under me. The next morning, I called my daughter Amanda. Given everything I'd learned, I wasn't sure who I could trust anymore. "Dad?" Amanda answered, sounding surprised. "Is everything okay? It's early here. I hadn't considered the 3-hour time difference to Boston. I'm sorry for calling so early, but I need to talk to you about something important. It's about James." There was a pause. "What's he done now?" Her tone made me hesitate. "What do you mean by that?" Amanda sighed. "Dad, I didn't want to worry you, but James came to me 6 months ago asking for money. A lot of money. He said it was for his business, but when I pressed him for details, his story kept changing. I refused, and he got angry. Really angry." "Did he tell you I have dementia?" I asked bluntly. "What?" "No. Dad, are you okay?" I explained everything that had happened, from the phone call to discovering the fraudulent sale. Amanda listened in stunned silence. "Oh my God," she said when I finished. "I knew he was having problems, but I never imagined he'd go this far." "What problems?" I asked. Amanda was quiet for a moment. "Dad, there's something you need to know about James. He's got gambling debts. Serious ones, to dangerous people." "Gambling debts? How do you know this?" "His wife Tracy called me a few months ago. She was terrified. James had taken out a second mortgage on their house without telling her. When she found out and confronted him, he admitted he owed money to some loan shark in Vegas. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. My mind was reeling. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tracy begged me not to. She said James was getting help, seeing a therapist, going to Gamblers Anonymous meetings. She thought they were working through it." After I hung up with Amanda, my phone rang again. It was Tracy, James's wife, crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Richard, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I just found out what James did. I had no idea, I swear. Tracy, calm down. Tell me what happened. She took a deep breath. I was paying bills this morning and realized I couldn't access our joint account. When I called the bank, they said the account had been emptied 3 days ago. The kids' college funds too. Everything's gone. My heart sank. Tracy and James had 2 children, 10 and 8. They had been saving for their college education since they were born. Do you know where James is now? I asked. He told me he was going on a business trip to New York. But I found his passport missing from the safe, along with some cash we kept there for emergencies. An hour later, I was sitting in Tracy's living room. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. I should have seen this coming, she said, wiping away tears. The signs were all there. Late nights, secretive phone calls, unexplained expenses. You thought he was having an affair? I asked. Tracy nodded. That's what I confronted him about 3 months ago. He laughed and said I was being paranoid. Then he admitted he'd been gambling again, promised he was getting help. I believed him. She looked down at her hands. I wanted to believe him. Again? This has happened before? 10 years ago, before the kids were born. He lost almost $50,000 betting on football games. We almost divorced over it, but he went to therapy, joined a support group. He seemed to get better. I sat back, trying to process this information. I had no idea. He was so ashamed, especially with you and Sarah being so successful. He begged me not to tell anyone in the family. Just then, the doorbell rang. Tracy answered it and returned with a man in his 60s who looked strikingly similar to me. William, I said, standing to greet my brother. William and I had never been particularly close. He lived in San Diego, and we saw each other only on holidays and special occasions. Amanda called me, William explained. She thought I should know what's going on. Over the next hour, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. William revealed that James had approached him 4 months ago, asking for a loan of $75,000 to expand his business. I gave it to him, William admitted. He said you had already invested twice that amount and were seeing great returns. I never gave James a penny for his business, I said. William's face darkened. That little snake. He showed me documents, projections, everything looked legitimate. By the end of the day, Tracy had called several family members and close friends. A disturbing pattern emerged. James had been systematically borrowing money from everyone in his circle, telling different stories to different people, playing on their sympathies and trust. The most shocking revelation came from Tracy herself. She had found emails on James's laptop between him and a woman named Heather. They've been planning to leave the country together, Tracy said, her voice hollow. He told her he was coming into a large sum of money and they could start a new life in South America. I felt physically ill. My son wasn't just a gambler who had made some bad decisions. He was a con man who had deliberately manipulated and betrayed everyone who loved him. We need to decide what to do, William said, his lawyer brain already working on the problem. This is criminal fraud. He could go to prison. Tracy burst into fresh tears. What about the kids? How do I tell them their father is a criminal? I looked at the photos on the wall. James with his children at the beach, at Disneyland, at school events. The same beach house he had just sold out from under me. The same children whose future he had gambled away. I need to talk to a lawyer, I said finally. Not just about the house, but about everything. James needs to be stopped before he hurts anyone else. As everyone nodded in agreement, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Amanda. Booking next flight out. We'll get through this together, Dad. For the first time since James's call about selling the beach house, I felt a glimmer of hope. My family was fractured, but not everyone had betrayed me. Some bonds remained unbroken. The next morning, I met with Douglas Freeman, an attorney who specialized in real estate and fraud cases. Douglas and I had known each other for years through local business associations. Richard, I'm so sorry you're going through this, Douglas said after I explained the situation. What James has done crosses several legal boundaries. Can we stop the sale? I asked. The buyers have already paid. We need to look at all the documentation first. Did you bring everything you have? I handed over the power of attorney document Paula had shown me, along with copies of the sale contract and everything else I had gathered. Douglas examined the papers carefully. The forgery is good, but it wouldn't stand up to expert analysis. The problem is that the sale has already gone through. The money has been transferred. We'd need to file for an emergency injunction to prevent the buyers from taking possession, but even then, the Turners are victims in this too, I said. They sold their home, paid fair market value for what they thought was a legitimate sale. Exactly. It's a mess. Let me make some calls, do some research. In the meantime, I suggest you gather any documentation you can find regarding the original purchase of the property and any trusts or conditions attached to it. Back at my apartment, I dug through the few files James hadn't managed to take. Most of my important documents had been in the filing cabinet he emptied, but I kept older papers in storage boxes in my closet. In a box labeled Sarah, Personal, I found a folder containing the original trust documents Sarah and I had set up years ago. As I read through them, a memory surfaced. "Richard, we need to protect what we've built," Sarah had said about 15 years ago. "Not just for us, but for Amanda and James too." We had met with an estate attorney who helped us set up various legal structures to minimize taxes and ensure smooth transition of assets. At Sarah's insistence, we had placed the beach house into an irrevocable trust with specific conditions. I called Douglas immediately. I found something. The beach house isn't just in my name. It's in an irrevocable trust Sarah and I established years ago. "This changes everything," Douglas said, after I explained the terms of the trust. "An irrevocable trust can't be altered or revoked without the consent of the named beneficiaries. If the house is in the trust, James had no legal right to sell it, with or without power of attorney. So the sale is invalid? Potentially, yes. I need to see those trust documents right away." 2 hours later, I was back in Douglas's office. He looked up from the trust paperwork with the first smile I'd seen in days. "Richard, your wife was a very smart woman. This trust is rock solid. The beach house cannot be sold without the consent of all named beneficiaries, which includes both James and Amanda. Since Amanda never consented to this sale, it's invalid." Relief washed over me. "So I can keep my house?" "It's not quite that simple. The buyers have acted in good faith. They've paid money, started moving in. We need to unwind this carefully to minimize damage to all innocent parties." Over the next few days, Douglas worked to build a legal case. He filed for an emergency injunction to halt the Turners' move into the property. The judge granted it pending a hearing the following week. Paula, the real estate agent, provided a sworn statement confirming that James had presented medical documentation claiming I had dementia and needed assisted living care. The money from the sale, $1.5 million, had been wire transferred to an offshore account James had set up. "We need to report this to the police," Douglas advised. "This is clear fraud, and the amount makes it grand larceny. James could be facing serious jail time." The thought of my son in prison made my stomach churn, but I knew Douglas was right. I contacted Detective Bryce Marshall at the Los Angeles Police Department's Fraud Division. Detective Marshall was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a direct manner. "Unfortunately, Mr. Richards, what you're describing is not uncommon," she said after hearing my story. "Elder fraud is on the rise, often perpetrated by family members." "I'm not elderly," I protested. "And I certainly don't have dementia." "Of course not," she agreed. "But that was the story your son used to facilitate the fraud. Based on what you've told me, this wasn't impulsive. It was calculated, planned over months." Detective Marshall asked if James had any previous criminal record. I assured her he didn't, but Tracy, who had accompanied me to the police station, spoke up. "Actually, there was an incident in college," she said quietly. "Before I knew him, he was caught running an unauthorized betting operation in his dorm. The school handled it internally, but he was on probation for a year. This was news to me. James had told us he was on academic probation for poor grades. As we left the police station, Tracy looked at me apologetically. There's so much I should have told you over the years. I was trying to protect him, to protect our marriage. I thought if I just loved him enough, supported him enough, he would change. We all want to believe the best about the people we love, I said, thinking of how blind I had been to my own son's deception. Back at Douglas's office, we received more disturbing news. James had apparently attempted similar schemes with other relatives, though on a smaller scale. Your cousin Edward in Florida called, Douglas told me. James approached him 6 months ago, claiming you needed specialized medical treatment not covered by insurance. Edward sent $10,000 to an account James provided. This is a pattern of behavior, Detective Marshall confirmed when I called her with this new information. We're building a case, but we need to find your son. Throughout all of this, James remained unreachable. His phone went straight to voicemail. His email accounts bounced back messages. According to Tracy, he hadn't contacted his children since disappearing 3 days ago. The kids keep asking when Daddy's coming home, she said during one of our daily check-in calls. I don't know what to tell them. That evening, alone in my apartment, I found myself looking at old family photos. James as a toddler, taking his first steps. James on his first day of school, backpack almost bigger than he was. James at his high school graduation, proud and full of promise. Where had it all gone wrong? Had there been signs I missed? Moments when I could have intervened? The weight of these questions kept me awake long into the night. The next morning, Douglas called with unexpected news. The trust has another provision I missed initially, he said. In the event of attempted fraud or malfeasance by any beneficiary, that person's interest in the trust is automatically forfeit and redistributed among the remaining beneficiaries. Meaning? Meaning that if we prove James committed fraud, which seems likely, he loses his share of the trust entirely. Everything would go to Amanda, with you remaining as trustee until your death. I sat with that information for a moment. Sarah had anticipated something like this. Not necessarily that our son would try to steal from us, but that protections needed to be in place. My practical, forward-thinking wife had been looking out for our family even after she was gone. There's something else, Douglas continued. The Turners' attorney contacted me. They're devastated about the situation but understand they've been victims of fraud. They're willing to work with us on a solution, but they're effectively homeless right now, having sold their previous home. I thought about the Turners, innocent people caught in my family's dysfunction. Tell them I'll help them find alternative housing, cover their costs until this is resolved. As I hung up, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I would resolve this mess, not just for myself, but for everyone James had hurt. And then I would find my son and confront him with the truth of what he had done. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Tracy received a credit card alert for a hotel booking under James's name. The Airport Grand Hotel, just 5 miles from LAX. He's still in Los Angeles, Tracy said when she called me. The reservation is for 3 nights, starting yesterday. I called Detective Marshall immediately, but her response was frustrating. Mr. Richards, we can't just storm into a hotel room based on a credit card charge. We need more evidence, a warrant. He's getting ready to flee the country, I argued. By the time you get your warrant, he'll be gone. I understand your frustration, but we have to follow proper procedure. After ending the call, I made a decision. I wouldn't wait for the legal system's wheels to turn. I would confront James myself. I called Tracy. I'm going to the hotel. Do you want to come? There was a long pause. Yes. He needs to face both of us. An hour later, Tracy and I stood in the lobby of the Airport Grand Hotel. She looked nervous, continuously twisting her wedding ring around her finger. What exactly are we going to do? She asked. We're going to talk to him. Make him understand he can't run from this. At the front desk, I explained that we needed to reach my son James Richards urgently for a family emergency. The receptionist, a young man with a sympathetic expression, checked the system. We do have a Mr. Richards checked in, room 412. Would you like me to call up? No, I said quickly. We'd prefer to surprise him. It's his birthday. The lie came easily, too easily perhaps. The receptionist smiled and wished us luck. As we rode the elevator to the 4th floor, Tracy's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her face paled. It's a text from James. He says he's sorry for everything, but it's too late to turn back now. He says to tell the kids he loves them. That sounds like a goodbye message, I said, alarmed. We need to hurry. We practically ran down the hallway to room 412. I knocked firmly on the door. James? It's Dad. We need to talk. Silence. I knocked again, louder. James, I know you're in there. Open the door. Finally, we heard movement inside the room. The door opened a crack, and James peered out. He looked terrible, unshaven, with dark circles under his bloodshot eyes. Dad, he said, his voice rough. Tracy, what are you doing here? We need to talk, I repeated. May we come in? James hesitated, then opened the door wider. The room was a mess, clothes strewn everywhere, fast food containers piled on the desk. A half-packed suitcase lay open on the bed. Going somewhere? I asked, indicating the suitcase. James ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Look, I know you're angry, but you don't understand. I had no choice. No choice? Tracy's voice shook with anger. You emptied our bank accounts. You stole our children's college funds. You tried to sell your father's house out from under him. Tell me, James, what part of that didn't involve a choice? James sank down onto the bed, his head in his hands. I owed money to some very dangerous people. They were threatening me, threatening you and the kids. So your solution was to steal from your family? I asked. I was going to pay everyone back, James insisted. Once I was safe, established somewhere else, I would have made it right. With what money? Tracy demanded. The gambling money you keep losing? The business that never materializes? The magic investments that always fall through? James looked up, his expression hardening. You never believed in me, either of you. Dad, you and Mom were always so perfect, so successful. Do you have any idea what it was like growing up in your shadow? Nothing I did was ever good enough. That's not true, I said, taken aback by the bitterness in his voice. Isn't it? When I told you about my business, asked for your investment, you demanded business plans, projections, like I was applying for a loan at your bank instead of asking my own father for help. Because I wanted you to succeed, I exclaimed. Because I've seen too many businesses fail because of poor planning. You never gave me the chance to prove myself, James shot back. Amanda was always your favorite, the good child, the one who followed in your footsteps. That's ridiculous, I said. We never played favorites. Really? When Amanda needed money for grad school, you wrote a check on the spot. When I needed startup capital, you made me jump through hoops. That was different. Education is an investment in yourself. A business venture is inherently risky. James laughed bitterly. See? Always the rational architect, planning everything, controlling everything. Just like Mom. The mention of Sarah made my temper flare. Don't bring your mother into this. She would be heartbroken to see what you've become. She was never there, James shouted, jumping to his feet. All those late nights at the office, business trips, client meetings. Do you know how many school plays she missed? How many baseball games? She was too busy building her precious career, her precious reputation. She was building a future for our family, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Everything we did for you and Amanda. No, James said, his voice suddenly quiet, intense. You did it for yourselves. And then when Mom got sick, when she needed you most, you were too busy with that Phoenix project to notice the symptoms earlier. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. What are you talking about? She told me, James said. 3 months before her diagnosis, she told me she wasn't feeling well, was losing weight. But you were so wrapped up in that big project, working 14-hour days, she didn't want to distract you. By the time you noticed, it was too late. I staggered back, leaning against the wall for support. Could it be true? Had Sarah been hiding her symptoms to avoid distracting me? The thought was unbearable. James, that's enough, Tracy said firmly. You don't get to rewrite history to justify what you've done. This isn't about your childhood or your mother's illness. This is about the choices you've made as an adult. James turned to her, his expression softening slightly. Tracy, you have to believe me. I was trying to protect you, protect the kids. These people I owe money to, they're serious. They threatened to hurt you if I didn't pay. So you decided to run away? Leave me to deal with the fallout? Leave our children without a father? I was going to send for you once I was settled. Tracy shook her head in disbelief. With what money, James? The money you stole from our children's future? From your father? There's more money coming, James insisted. Heather has connections. Her uncle has a business opportunity in Costa Rica. We just need startup capital. Heather? Tracy repeated. Who's Heather? James froze, realizing his mistake. James has a girlfriend, I explained to Tracy. They've been planning to run away together. Tracy's face crumpled. All this time, I thought it was just the gambling. But you've been cheating on me too? It's not like that, James protested. Heather understands me. She believes in me. She doesn't judge me like everyone else. Just then, there was a knock at the door. James tensed, looking panicked. Are you expecting someone? I asked. No, James whispered. It might be them, the people I owe money to. They must have tracked me down. Tracy moved away from the door, frightened. Answer it, I said to James. He shook his head. They'll hurt us. I stepped toward the door. Then I'll answer it. Dad, no. I opened the door to find a young woman, probably in her 20s, with bleached blonde hair and too much makeup. She looked surprised to see me. Who are you? She demanded. I'm James's father. And you must be Heather. Her eyes narrowed. Where's James? We have a flight to catch. From behind me, James called out, Heather, baby, thank God you're here. My dad and wife showed up out of nowhere. We need to leave now. Heather pushed past me into the room. What's going on, Jimmy? You said you took care of everything. I did? James said desperately. There's just been a complication. I looked at this woman, barely older than a college student, who had been part of my son's plan to abandon his family and disappear with stolen money. Heather, I said calmly, there's something you should know about James. The money he promised you? It's not his. He stole it from his family. The police are looking for him right now. Heather's expression changed from annoyance to alarm. What? Jimmy, you said the money was from your business deal. You said your dad was giving you your inheritance early. He's lying to you, Tracy said. Just like he's been lying to all of us. Heather looked at James, who was sweating visibly now. Is that true? Are the cops after you? Baby. It's complicated, James stammered. I can explain everything. I'm not going to jail for you, Heather said, backing toward the door. This isn't what I signed up for. Heather, wait. James lunged toward her, grabbing her arm. I stepped between them. Let her go, James. You're ruining everything, James shouted, his face contorted with rage. He shoved me hard, sending me stumbling backward. What happened next was chaotic. Tracy screamed. Heather broke free and ran into the hallway. James tried to follow her, but I blocked his way. We struggled, and in his desperation, James punched me in the face. The pain was sharp and immediate. I tasted blood from a split lip. James looked shocked by what he had done, standing frozen as I staggered back. The commotion had attracted attention. The hotel security guard appeared in the doorway, his hand on his radio. Everything okay in here? He asked, looking from my bleeding face to James's wild expression. This is a family matter, I said, wiping blood from my lip. But it's under control now. The security guard looked skeptical. Sir, I'm going to have to ask all of you to come down to the security office. We've had complaints about the disturbance. James looked at the open door, at the hallway beyond, clearly considering making a run for it. James, I said quietly, don't make this worse than it already is. For a moment, I thought he would bolt. Then his shoulders sagged, and he nodded in defeat. As we followed the security guard to the elevator, Tracy whispered to me, What now? Now we get James the help he needs, I replied, whether he wants it or not. In the hotel security office, A small room with a desk and several monitors showing security camera feeds. James sat slumped in a chair, all the fight gone out of him. Tracy stood by the door, arms crossed, her face a mask of contained fury. The security guard, Ron according to his name tag, had given me an ice pack for my lip and was asking if I wanted to press charges. No, I said. But I would like to make a phone call. I stepped outside the office and called Amanda, who had arrived in Los Angeles that morning and was staying at my apartment. We found him, I told her. He's at the Airport Grand Hotel. Is he okay? Despite everything, concern for her brother was evident in Amanda's voice. Physically, yes. Mentally, I'm not so sure. He's been living in a fantasy world, Amanda. He genuinely believes everyone else is to blame for his problems. What's the plan now? I'm going to call Dr. Wilson. James needs professional help, immediately. Dr. Robert Wilson was an old friend who had been Sarah's oncologist during her illness. After her death, he had helped me through my grief. He was also the head of psychiatry at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Dr. Wilson answered on the third ring. Richard? Is everything all right? I gave him a brief overview of the situation. Bring him in, Dr. Wilson said without hesitation. Based on what you're describing, we may be looking at more than just a gambling addiction. The erratic behavior, the elaborate deceptions, the lack of empathy for his victims, these could be symptoms of a more serious condition. He won't come voluntarily, I warned. If he's a danger to himself or others, we can initiate a 72-hour psychiatric hold. Given that he's depleted his children's college funds, attempted to sell your home fraudulently, and appears to be planning to flee the country, I'd say he meets the criteria. With Dr. Wilson's guidance, I contacted Detective Marshall and explained the plan. She agreed to meet us at the hospital rather than arresting James immediately. Mental health issues complicate criminal cases, she acknowledged. If your son is diagnosed with a condition that affected his judgment, that could impact how the case proceeds. Back in the security office, I approached James, who was now staring blankly at the floor. Son, I said gently, we're going to get you some help. James looked up, his eyes dull. It's too late for that. It's never too late, I insisted. I've arranged for you to see Dr. Wilson at Cedars-Sinai. A doctor? James laughed hollowly. What's he going to do? Cure me of being a failure? James, Tracy said, her voice softer than it had been all day. Think about the kids. They need their father. Not a father who runs away when things get tough, but one who faces his problems and solves them. Something in her words seemed to reach him. He looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. How can you even look at me after what I've done? He asked. Because you're the father of my children, Tracy replied. And because I have to believe the man I married is still in there somewhere, buried under all this mess you've created. James nodded slowly. Okay, I'll see the doctor. The drive to Cedars-Sinai was tense and quiet. Amanda met us there, rushing forward to hug me when she saw my swollen lip. Dad, your face, she exclaimed. Did James do that? It was an accident, I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Dr. Wilson was waiting for us in a private consultation room. After introductions, he asked to speak with James alone. This could take some time, he told us. There's a cafeteria on the ground floor if you'd like to wait there. For the next 2 hours, Amanda, Tracy, and I sat in the hospital cafeteria, picking at sandwiches none of us had the appetite to eat. Tracy shared more details about James's gambling history, how it had started with casual sports betting in college and escalated over the years. He would go months, sometimes years without incident, she explained. Then something would trigger him, a financial setback or stress at work, and he'd start again. Each time, the stakes got higher, the lies more elaborate. Why didn't you leave? Amanda asked. Tracy looked down at her wedding ring. I loved him. I still do. And every time he seemed genuinely remorseful, genuinely committed to change. I understood all too well. I had missed the signs too, had chosen to believe the best about my son, rather than confront the possibility that he was deeply troubled. Finally, Dr. Wilson found us in the cafeteria. His expression was grave. "I've conducted an initial assessment," he said, sitting down at our table. "Based on our conversation and the behaviors described, I'm recommending James be admitted for further evaluation and treatment." "What's wrong with him?" I asked. "I can't make a definitive diagnosis yet, but his symptoms are consistent with bipolar disorder with comorbid gambling addiction. The impulsivity, grandiose thinking, risk-taking behavior, all point in that direction." "Bipolar?" Tracy repeated. "But he's never had manic episodes or depression." "Bipolar II disorder can present differently," Dr. Wilson explained. "Instead of full mania, patients experience hypomania, which can manifest as increased energy, impulsivity, and poor judgment. The depressive episodes may have been masked by the gambling, which can provide a temporary high." "Can it be treated?" Amanda asked. Dr. Wilson nodded. "With medication, therapy, and support, many people with bipolar disorder lead stable, productive lives. The gambling addiction will require its own treatment protocol, but addressing the underlying condition is the first step." "And he's agreed to this?" I asked, skeptical that James would voluntarily commit himself. "Not exactly," Dr. Wilson admitted. "Given the severity of his condition and the immediate risk of him fleeing the country, I've initiated a 72-hour psychiatric hold. During that time, we'll conduct a comprehensive evaluation and develop a treatment plan." Detective Marshall arrived as we were processing this news. Dr. Wilson explained the situation to her as well. "The criminal investigation will proceed," she told us. "But given the circumstances, I'll note in my report that the suspect is seeking psychiatric treatment. That may influence how the prosecutor decides to handle the case." As night fell, visiting hours at the hospital came to an end. Tracy decided to stay nearby, checking into the hospital's family accommodation. "I need to be here when he wakes up," she said. "He needs to know he's not alone in this." Amanda and I returned to my apartment, both of us emotionally exhausted. "Do you think he'll get better?" she asked as we sat in my living room, the city lights twinkling outside the window. "I have to believe he will," I replied. "Your mother always said that understanding a problem was the first step to solving it. Now that we know what we're dealing with, we can help James find his way back." "And the beach house? The fraud charges? All the money he took?" I sighed. "One step at a time, Amanda. First, we make sure James is stable and getting the treatment he needs. Then we'll figure out how to clean up the rest of this mess." As I lay in bed that night, I thought about what James had said about Sarah, about her hiding her symptoms because of my work schedule. Was there truth to that accusation? Had I been so wrapped up in my career that I missed the signs of my wife's illness until it was too late? These painful questions had no easy answers. But I realized that regardless of past mistakes, what mattered now was how I moved forward. Sarah would have wanted me to help our son, to find a path to healing for our fractured family. The next morning, Tracy called with surprising news. James's doctor ran some blood tests. His lithium levels were through the roof. "Lithium?" I asked, confused. "He's already on medication?" "Apparently so. He's been seeing a psychiatrist for the past year, Dr. Landry. She prescribed lithium for bipolar disorder, but James hasn't been taking it regularly. When he does take it, he sometimes takes too much, thinking more is better." This revelation shed new light on James's behavior. He hadn't just been struggling with gambling addiction. He had been dealing with an untreated mental illness, self-medicating inconsistently and incorrectly. Over the next 3 days, as James remained under psychiatric observation, the pieces of our family puzzle slowly began to fit together. Dr. Landry, with James's permission, shared his medical records with Dr. Wilson. James had first sought treatment after a particularly severe gambling episode a year ago, but had been inconsistent with both his medication and therapy appointments. Medication non-compliance is common with bipolar disorder, Dr. Wilson explained during a family meeting, especially during hypomanic phases when patients feel energetic and creative. They don't want to dampen those feelings, so they stop taking their meds. James himself was beginning to show signs of improvement as his medication was properly adjusted. The wild mood swings had stabilized. He was sleeping regularly. Most importantly, he was showing genuine remorse for his actions. "I've hurt everyone I love," he told us during a supervised visit. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want a chance to make amends somehow." It wasn't going to be easy. The legal consequences of James's actions still loomed large. The fraudulent house sale had been officially invalidated, with Douglas working to ensure the Turners were compensated for their inconvenience. Detective Marshall was building a case that would eventually go to the district attorney's office. But for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a glimmer of hope. My son wasn't just a con man who had callously betrayed his family. He was a sick man who had made terrible choices while struggling with an untreated mental illness. That didn't excuse his actions, but it helped me understand them. And understanding, as Sarah always said, was the first step toward healing. 6 months passed. Spring turned to summer, and the waves crashed against the shore below my deck at the beach house. I sat in my favorite chair, watching the sunset, thinking about how much had changed since that fateful phone call from James. The legal consequences of his actions had been serious, but not as devastating as they might have been. After 3 months of inpatient treatment, James had been diagnosed with bipolar II disorder and gambling addiction. With statements from his doctors and character references from family and friends, the district attorney had agreed to a plea deal. 2 years of probation, mandatory continuing psychiatric treatment, and full restitution to all victims. The irrevocable trust Sarah had established years ago had proven to be our family's salvation. The provision that any beneficiary attempting fraud would forfeit their interest had been legally triggered, but Amanda had intervened. "I don't want James cut out of his inheritance," she had told me. "Mom would want us to stay together as a family, to help him recover." With Douglas's help, we had modified the trust terms. James's share would remain intact but would be managed by a trustee, with distributions contingent on his continued treatment and recovery. It was a second chance, but with safeguards in place. The Turners, the couple who had unknowingly purchased my beach house in the fraudulent sale, had been made whole. Douglas had helped me find them a similar property a few miles down the coast, and I had covered their moving expenses and the difference in price. They had been understanding beyond what I could have hoped for, even sending a housewarming card to their new address with a note that simply read, "Family is worth fighting for." Tracy and James were in marriage counseling, working to rebuild their relationship one day at a time. The children's college funds had been replenished, partly from my own savings and partly from the liquidation of some of James's assets. Tracy had taken control of their finances, with James agreeing to have no access to credit cards or bank accounts during his recovery. The woman, Heather, who had planned to flee the country with James, had disappeared from our lives as quickly as she had entered it. Detective Marshall later informed us that she was known to law enforcement, having been involved in similar schemes with vulnerable men in the past. James had been both perpetrator and victim, his mental illness making him susceptible to her manipulation. As for James himself, the road to recovery had been difficult but steady. The proper medication regimen had stabilized his mood swings. Twice weekly therapy sessions had helped him understand the patterns of his addiction and develop coping strategies. Most importantly, he had taken responsibility for his actions, making amends where possible and accepting the consequences where necessary. Today was a milestone. For the first time since the crisis, our entire family was gathering at the beach house. James and Tracy were bringing the children. Amanda and her husband were flying in from Boston with their kids. Even my brother William was coming, our relationship strengthened by the ordeal we had weathered together. I heard cars pulling into the driveway and stood up from my chair. Taking a deep breath, I went inside to greet my family. James was the first through the door, looking healthier than I had seen him in years. Clear-eyed, with color in his cheeks and weight back on his formerly gaunt frame. He hesitated when he saw me, uncertainty in his expression. "Dad," he said simply. "James," I replied, and then stepped forward to embrace my son. The rest of the family poured in, the children running straight for the deck and the beach beyond. Tracy gave me a warm hug, whispering, "Thank you for not giving up on him," in my ear. As we prepared dinner together, I found myself working alongside James in the kitchen, the two of us falling into an easy rhythm as we chopped vegetables and seasoned the fish I had bought fresh that morning. "I never properly thanked you," James said quietly as we worked, "for fighting for me when I was at my worst, for seeing that I was sick when all I could see was that the world was against me." "You're my son," I said simply. "That doesn't change, no matter what." James nodded, blinking back tears. "I think about Mom a lot these days, about what she would think of all this." "She would be proud of how far you've come," I told him honestly. "Sarah always believed in second chances, in the power of family to heal wounds. Do you remember what she used to say? About houses?" I smiled at the memory. "A house is just walls and a roof. It's the people inside who make it a home." "I almost took that from you," James said, his voice catching. "Your home, your memories of Mom." "But you didn't," I reminded him. "And more importantly, you're working to rebuild what was damaged. That's what matters now." Later, as the sun set over the Pacific, our family gathered on the deck. Tracy's children played a board game with their cousins. Amanda and her husband chatted with William about his recent retirement. Tracy and James sat close together on the porch swing, her head on his shoulder. I looked around at this scene, at the family that had almost been torn apart but was now slowly knitting itself back together. The beach house stood solid beneath us, protected by Sarah's foresight and our collective determination to preserve what mattered most. Life had taught me many lessons over my 65 years, but perhaps none as powerful as what I had learned these past 6 months. That families, like houses, need solid foundations to weather storms. That sometimes the greatest threats come from within, not without. That healing is possible even after the deepest betrayals. And most importantly, that love, while not blind to faults, can see beyond them to the possibility of redemption. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear over the ocean, I raised my glass in a toast. "To Sarah," I said, my voice strong and clear, "who taught us all that the strongest structures are built not just with hands, but with hearts." "To Sarah," my family echoed, glasses raised to the twilight sky. And in that moment, I felt her presence among us, her wisdom guiding us still. The beach house she had loved so much was once again filled with laughter and life, just as she had always intended it to be. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between justice and mercy when someone you love has betrayed your trust? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about family, forgiveness, and finding your way through life's most challenging moments. And if you know someone who might find comfort or wisdom in this journey, please share it with them. Thank you for listening, and remember that even in our darkest moments, healing and redemption are possible if we have the courage to pursue them.